cool and overcast, it looks like a little bit this morning.
Where you at again, California?
Yeah, I'm just in San Diego.
Oh, okay. Well,
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom, I'll keep my guns, try to keep my money and my religion too.
Now keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
I'm gonna keep my big VA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need, we know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. We're running an hour off today, so my apologies if you tried to catch the show live and I wasn't there. It's because I'm in Arizona and the time doesn't change. But my guest today is John Carman. And John, you run you do an investigative newsletter involving uncovering corruption within the Customs Service. And you were with U.S. Customs, were you not?
Yeah, that's correct. The website's been tampered with a little bit, but most of it's still active.
We got people that can mess with our websites here. If somebody doesn't want you talking about what? You're a veteran law enforcement officer for 25 years. You've worked for the U.S. Secret Service, the San Diego Police Department, the U.S. Mint Police, and the U.S. Customs Service. And your capacity with the Secret Service in 1974 to 1977, you served almost 3 years, and you were directly involved in the protection of the President, First Family, White House, Vice President and his family, ambassadors, embassies, and heads of state. Is that accurate?
Except I did serve over 3 years. There was a big deal about that because I had career status, which meant that I could go ahead and reinstate, which I did later, back to the Treasury Department. But that was the intent, was to leave, to come back to California and get involved in U.S. Customs, which was a more active law enforcement agency, due to the fact of the drug smuggling and the drug threat against the government, even back then in the 70s.
Well, let me talk about that, because I've got a book here. I published in the 70s, I published a motorcycle magazine, and I got handed some documentation on something called Operation Watchtower. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it. I'd have to try to reclaim my memory there, but I have heard of it.
It ran pretty much parallel to Iran-Contra, and George Bush was director of CIA. He sent the special forces down to Colombia to build radio towers in Colombia, and the radio towers were used to guide planes into Albrook Air Force Base in Panama. The cargo was cocaine.
Sounds familiar. Now I'm making some connections. Yeah, Barry Seal, Terry Reid.
Yes, sir. Barry Seal.
Manuel Noriega, people like that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I ran that story in my motorcycle magazine in Miami called Riders Exchange. almost 25 years ago, and that's the first time I got threatened by the CIA. Now,
just once, huh?
And I, by the way, Barry Seal dropped off some of the best Oaxacan at my house in Dallas, Texas one time, so I got to briefly meet him. And Terry Reed pretty much confirms. I've got Terry's book signed here behind me, but it confirms this whole drug smuggling operation. Now, right now, let me ask you about this. Right now, we've got the BATF, who were responsible for the facade at Waco, sending weapons to drug cartels in Mexico. I would say that's more likely that the one arm of the government was supplying another arm of the government. But what's going on? What's happening here? When I was involved with a presidential candidate in 1996, I talked to some Border Patrol people, and they said we could stop this, we could stop the drugs, we could stop the illegals. They won't let us. What's happening, John? And how did you come crossways with the U.S. government? My career spans now pissing off 4 presidents. What did you do as a law enforcement officer, as a oath keeper? What did you do?
Well, let me give you a piece of background on that one statement that you made. You're referring to the Fast and Furious investigation,
yes,
which is where they've actually made deals with certain cartels to give them guns, which means it's another Iran-Contra type situation with Mexico. And our government has made deals with 1 of 5 families, to give an example, of the cartels. And then once they get rid of the other 4, you're going to have 1 left over on the plate, and they'll eat those guys up too, probably. Back when I was at the White House, I came across a document on a gentleman's desk. I believe his name was Peter Benzinger at the time, who was the director of NDCP, National Drug Control Policy Office, at the time, which would be under the Ford and Carter administration. And there was a Border Patrol agent asking for help on the border because they just weren't getting it. Clay, nothing has changed since that time. 1974, 75, 76, 77, nothing's changed. They still keep it open. They don't shut it down enough. They don't have enough Border Patrol, Customs people at the border. I've got it on my website. I suggested years ago. My website became public in 98, 99, and I told people right there, they need to put 40,000 people down on the border and about another 25 to 30,000 on the northern border, because they've only got less than 10 on the northern border, working 3 shifts. So if you put 3 shifts covering 3,000 miles, and if you put 1 per mile, that's still not enough. You have to have it staggered to catch all the stuff that's coming through. Plus the paperwork and all these other things. But the government is doing this on purpose. And we could catch people, we could block off the trade. We get, it's coming in airplane, it's coming in by boat, it's coming in by land, rail car, cars, all kinds of vehicles. Commercial trucks are the biggest violators. And then, of course, we've got drug tunnels.
Now, I'm holding up right here. We're recording this for YouTube, and I'm holding up my magazine that I put out in November of 2007. The headline says, "Betrayed by Homeland Security," and I've got a picture of Monica Ramos and her husband, Border Patrol agent Ignacio Nacho Ramos, who was in prison for doing his job. And his family was at risk while he was beaten by illegals he put in prison. Now, this, you know the story of Ramos and Campion?
Right. I heard about the Campion Ramos case since 2007, I believe. And then, of course, it's been followed up by several other cases. I'm surprised they didn't report on my case, as a matter of fact. But they are taking whistleblowers and putting them in prison. A friend of mine named Sully Castillo, who's former DEA,
Yes.
he just got out of prison just recently on bogus charges. Campion and Ramos, that was the most ridiculous case I've ever heard, where they've got a drug smuggler that they actually were chasing down, and he was jumping over the fence, and I guess they shot at him. The supervisor came by later and said, well, he's gone. We don't know what happened to him, so don't worry about the report. Just pick up the brass or do whatever. But the problem was, even though you shoot your gun, you still got to put it in a report, and that's where they slammed these guys and made it look like, well, they tried to cover up or something. They didn't try to cover up anything, you know. And then later, you get a judge who doesn't have a brain, actually attacks as a 10-year sentence charge on because a gun was used. I mean, wait a minute. They're federal officers in the performance of their duties. They use their guns. They have permission to use their guns. They're shooting in defense or whatever. So what happened was you got a guy named, I believe his name is Johnny Sutton, who's a U.S. attorney or a assistant U.S. attorney in Arizona. Who's a real lowlife. Gives a deal to these smugglers, and that's what this guy did. He went back crying to his government, to the human rights office that they have down there, La Oficina de Humanos Derechos. And they go ahead and make a deal with the U.S. attorney and say, look, we'll make this guy your snitch. He will testify against 4 owned Border Patrol in the United States. You give him a green card and give him immunity and all this other stuff.
We did put enough. We did.
Our government's going crazy.
We did put enough pressure on George Bush that, besides giving away $2 trillion as he walked out of office, he did commute the sentences of Nacho Ramos and Jose Campion.
Well, they should have been totally pardoned instead of commuted.
Well, they didn't want that.
Commuted only means that they don't have the sentence, but they still have a record.
They didn't want that. They didn't. I had Nacho on my show. I interviewed him. He didn't want the pardon because they are still fighting this charge in courts. They still got it on appeal.
Right.
So.
Now you mentioned Nacho was Ramos.
Yes, Nacho Ramos.
Okay. Yeah. There was another case. There's another gentleman who was with Border Patrol by the name of Jesus Diaz, I believe, who recently was convicted and got a 2-year sentence because he handcuffed a suspect, a Mexican illegal, and put him in cuffs, and then they charged him with, human rights violations, etc., etc. What a bunch of BS. You know, if you've never worked the border and you've never dealt with these criminals and how they do things and how you're supposed to put people up. I worked 16 years at the border. I got over 25 years in federal, state, and local law enforcement, but I worked 16 years of it at the border. And these people that you have to cuff up, some of them are dangerous, some of them are scumbags. You have to cuff them up. And if they resist, they resist. And I've had people try and grab my gun on occasion. I've had to pull my gun and almost have to shoot to kill on occasion. And it exists down there. There's a war going on down there, and the American people are so desensitized to it, they don't get it. So
as a matter of fact,
stuff,
there are two retired generals were hired by the Department of Agriculture in Texas, and they did a report. Their report came back that the border counties along the border in Texas, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California, are war zones now. War zones.
Right. Are you familiar with the treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty of 1848?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that states basically that if we put armed troops down at the border, that basically instates some sort of war against Mexico. And I'm thinking, you know what? What difference does it matter? They've already got armed troops. They've got armed cartels making incursions into the United States. Even right now, as we speak, there's somebody driving through with a truck full of cocaine. And yet we have areas in the border that are so wide open, you literally can just drive right through a gated area. It's wide open.
They're putting warning signs up for Americans to stay out of this area over here in Pinal County.
Yeah.
County.
Well, that's the shooting zone. That's what that's for. Years ago, they had an incident where they had military at the border, and they had an incident where there was like a 14 or 15-year-old Mexican national shooting his rifle north into the United States, just because he felt like shooting into the United States. And I guess he may have hit near one of these counter sniper teams that we had up there. They ended up engaging him because the rules of engagement were necessary, because they're in danger. So, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still here. Go ahead.
Well, I was getting feedback. So anyway, you got situations like that, but I'm telling you, every possible incident that I've seen down there, I've tried to report to Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs doesn't care. They don't investigate. I reported specifically, this is real interesting. You've got I've got proof that shows that there was a district director named John Heinrich up in Long Beach, who's probably retired by now, who was accepting over $250,000 to allow 167 foreign nationals from Mexico to come to the United States without a customs or an immigration check. And you and I know that if you fly outside the country and you go international and you decide to come back, that you have to be inspected by customs and immigration. You have to check your passport, you have to make yourself present to make a customs declaration and go through the procedure. You know, what's your citizenship, what do you have to declare, do you have any money more than $10,000, that sort of thing. And they've actually signed this list with the names and dates of birth of Mexican nationals or people with Hispanic names, and they could land anywhere. If you got a dirt airstrip in Arizona, they could land there, and nobody could say anything because they had this document. But I already had it checked out, and they said it was illegal. I had the names checked out. None of those people had documents to come to the United States. What's Internal Affairs done? Nothing. And I'm going on the record again, after over 10 or 15 years of this, they still haven't done anything about it. So there's no telling who's coming and going. Now, the only people that have the authority to do that would be the President of the United States or his underlings, like the Secretary of Treasury or the cabinet members that he so directs, or the Department of Homeland Security in particular. Yeah, give an overflight exemption to this Saudi Arabian guy and let him fly in today, because he's got a meeting with him in, you know, Texas or Hawaii or whatever, you know, whoever it is this week. And that's how that might go.
Now, this corruption, now, in this document that Colonel Edward P. Catolo put out, talking about the CIA and the Mossad being involved here, there's been an Israeli angle running through this whole drug scene.
Well, I don't know. You know, Clay, I was doing research just recently about some of that stuff, and I've got people who are trying to alienate the United States against Israel. Why do you think that is when we're at war with Muslims and the Nation of Islam? People have to be smarter than that. Israel, in my opinion, is our ally. So the first thing they're going to do is try to attack that and say, no, Israel is involved in the drug smuggling. Israel is involved in 9/11. Israel is involved in everything you could think of. I think that's a bunch of hogwash. I think it's BS, because it wouldn't be in their best interest to do that. We support them. And when they get attacked, guess who's going to back them up? So why does it sound kind of funny that all of a sudden, well, gee, the Mossad is involved in this, that, and the other? No, it doesn't sound right. Where's their proof? What's the proof? I have to ask that, you know.
Well, we've got, what about Homeland Security? I mean, this is, you've got Jewish people.
Let's talk about it.
You've got dual
Homeland Security with Tom Ridge years ago. All they did was take all the agencies, stir it up to one big bowl, and dump it out, and then he walked away after a couple of years. Tom Ridge did not have a background for law enforcement. None of these idiots in government have any background in law enforcement? Name one person. You know, does Chertoff, does Tom Ridge and any of these other guys, did they have a background in law enforcement? No. None of them. So all of a sudden you get these political guys going there and say, well, I'm going to change things just to do it for change. We're going to give you guys new badges, new uniforms, new whatever, and we're going to make you guys do customs work and make the other guys in customs do immigration work and really screw them up. The only consistent guys out there are Border Patrol. They're called CBP, Customs Border Protection, but they still wear the same green uniform. They drive the same Border Patrol vehicles, and they do the same job that they've been doing for years. You know, catching illegals and maybe an occasional drug bust. But they screwed things up when they did that. If I was president today, I would change everything back to its original form and put their agencies back where they're supposed to be and just have them communicate amongst each other, which is what they should be doing.
All right, I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree with you on one point. I've done history.
Sure,
I've been studying history. I read just about every newspaper. I read the Jerusalem Post. I read the New York Times, and I've interviewed a lot of people like you, and I appreciate your experience. In my opinion, the whole customs service is being undermined because they want the drugs to come up here, don't they? Don't they want them? I mean, they are
the government that are allowing it. Yes, this is correct. There are people that are doing it. I've actually caught situations where you got a customs supervisor, and I state this on my website. There's a guy named Arthur Gilbert who still works for the Customs Service, who is trying to prevent the interception of 8,500 pounds of cocaine in one tanker truck that came through one night back in 1991, October, and he was directly interfering with the processes of a canine officer who had his dog alerting all over the place on this truck. And he's trying to write it off, saying, no, he probably smells the aroma of a faint marijuana cigarette in the distance or something, and just to let these trucks go through. And they were letting 10 trucks go in on a nightly basis. Think about 8,500 pounds of cocaine times how many millions of dollars that is. That's at least $150, $200 million per truck. That's a lot of money.
Okay, and talking about a lot of money, we do underwrite Israel to the tune of several $billion. And in my research, 9/11, there was no Arabs and no Muslims involved in 9/11 other than somebody working as a Mossad agent or a CIA agent. And as far as I'm concerned, John, the CIA and the Mossad are the same intelligence agency, and they're working for the banksters. They're not working for the American people. And I also wanted to talk to you about another area here. I mean, this whole drug smuggling thing, the government's gotten involved in it. We got the BATF supplying guns, and the Justice Department basically covering up for them. Isn't Holder covering up for this whole smuggling system? Or
well, Holder is a liar and a traitor to the country of the United States, and he's going to go down pretty soon. In fact, in the last 24 hours, I've heard some activity going on with Mr. Barry Soetoro as well. But Holder is not unaccustomed to lying, and he was the one that was responsible for getting this drug smuggler named Mark Rich,
yes,
a presidential partner from Clinton years ago, or Bush.
Bush, yes.
Yeah, it was Bush, right?
Yes.
And he made donations, I think, Mr. Rich, to the presidential campaign of over $250,000. So if you've got a lot of money and you donate to the presidential campaign of your choice, you're going to get a pardon.
I refer, and maybe you might agree with me on this. We may not agree on the role of Israel, because I've been following the Jewish question for a couple of thousand years, and they certainly have a role
on that. That's good information to dig into, because we need to clarify as much as we can.
If somebody, it's real simple. You and I both took an oath. I took it when I was 17 years old to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And
Same here.
and I've read the Constitution, and I've read the whole Communist Manifesto, and it disturbs me that every plank on the Communist Manifesto is intact. And I want to know, as a citizen, I've tried to do something about this. What is the law enforcement doing? I mean, if I'm aware of Operation Watchtower, and I'm just an old biker from Texas, and I know who flew the planes and who delivered the drugs and who got the payoffs, and Tara Reid even had pictures of George Bush Jr. and his brother taking a kilo of cocaine. So we know about this. We know about
Well, where have I heard that before? That's common knowledge from some people in certain groups, too. That's also very dangerous information to have also, but I agree with you. You're no different than me. You are. Even though you may or may not have had a badge, you're in the same situation, and I'm in the same situation you are. Because I tried to enforce the law, I tried to do the job, and that was it, and I did the job too well. That's why I got in trouble. That's what people tell me all the time. Says I was too good at what I did, and I stepped on some toes, and I prevented some serious contraband from coming in the United States.
Yeah, let me make one little clarification here. I am not anti-Semitic, and Israel, you know, I've got some problems with the way that was done according to the UN treaty, according to the Balfour Declaration, the whole thing. I think the problem we face, John, is how do you fight evil without becoming evil? And that's what's happened to a lot of the Jews down there in Israel. They treat the Palestinians worse than the Germans or the Russians treated them. And the problem I have with Israel,
how many Palestinians do you know?
I don't know many of them. I know the ones that you know, that are just bombed.
Let me give you a small example.
Okay.
I'll give you a couple of small ones.
Right.
When I was doing private investigator work, I was working for a gentleman. I don't think he's Hebrew or Jewish, but he does go to the Middle East on occasion. But he met with this lady in San Diego. She's still here to this day, as far as I know. And she used to make phone calls to Yasser Arafat every morning. She would talk to this guy. And I'd go, wait a minute, Yasser Arafat's the head of the PLO. He's a terrorist. He paid families to let their children wear bomb vests so they could go commit suicide bombings and kill people. And this same woman was still friendly with this guy before he died, you know? And I'm going, okay, that's some of the background on this guy, but I've actually dealt with a client that came from Israel. Now, you won't hear of many of these, but he was an Israeli born, that makes him an Israeli national, Palestinian, Muslim, and he's not Jewish. So he's in the other three categories. I go, wait a minute, this guy's looking for his ex-wife, who's Catholic, Hispanic, whatever, and he wants to locate his child. But within 2 hours, I found out that he didn't have good intentions. This guy was dangerous. He's Muslim. I'm telling you, unless you've met a bunch of Muslims like I have, they're fanatics, they're spoiled rotten, they think they own everything, and they do treat women like dirt, and the whole religion is very controlling. It's not just a religion, it's a political way of life, it's military, and it's a religion. And when they throw a military aspect in there, that makes them every bit as much dangerous as the guys who were in D.C. chopping people's heads off and throwing them out the tall buildings in Washington, D.C. when I was back there.
I do not doubt for one moment the danger presented by the Muslims. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, the dual citizens that are Jewish out there are trying to stir up problems between the Muslims and the white folks, the kind of the way they did to stir up Americans and English and you know, against Germans.
Well, that's a good point. Let me reemphasize some of what you just said too, because very smart people, especially in the intelligence community, or like CIA, Mossad, and things like that. But I'm not going to blame anything on any of those people right now. I'm just going to say that the smartest person doesn't do the jobs himself. He gets somebody else